Before the sun had fully risen over the quiet city, Aisha stood at the small window of her rented room, tying the last button of her faded uniform with trembling fingers, her heart heavy with worry as the soft breathing of her twin daughters filled the air behind her. Zara and Zoya, barely 3 years old, slept curled together on the thin mattress, their tiny hands locked as if even in sleep they feared being separated. And Aisha knew she had reached a moment no mother ever wants to face. Because that morning her neighbor who usually watched the girls had fallen sick, the daycare demanded fees she could not pay, and missing work was not an option. Missing even one day meant losing the job that barely kept food on the table, so with silent tears she gently woke the twins, dressed them in their cleanest clothes, brushed their hair, and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, promising warmth, food, and safety. Even as doubt gnawed at her chest, the mansion where she worked loomed larger than usual as she arrived, its white pillars shining in the morning light, a symbol of a world far removed from her own struggles, and as she stepped inside holding the twins' hands, she felt every eye turned toward her with surprise, judgment, and confusion, the other staff exchanging glances while she lowered her gaze, already rehearsing apologies in her mind, her voice shaking as she explained that it was only for one day, that she would keep the girls quiet, that they wouldn't disturb anyone, and then she heard footsteps, slow, confident, echoing across the marble floor, and when she looked up, she saw him, Mr. Daniel Hartman, the owner of the mansion, a self-made millionaire known for his discipline and silence, a man who rarely spoke to staff beyond brief instructions, his sharp eyes taking in the scene before him, the tired maid, the two identical little girls clutching her dress, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear, and in that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Aisha's heart pounded as she prepared for the worst, imagining dismissal, embarrassment, maybe even being escorted out, but instead of anger, something unexpected crossed the billionaire's face, something soft, something human, as he crouched down to the twins' level and asked their names, his voice gentle enough to surprise everyone, and when Zara shyly smiled and Zoya reached out to touch his watch, the tension in the room shifted like a sudden change in weather. He asked Aisha why they were there, and with tears she told him the truth, not a dramatic story, not excuses, just the simple reality of a mother with no options, and the honesty in her voice carried the weight of years of sacrifice, of skipped meals and sleepless nights, of dreams put aside so two small lives could grow, and as she spoke, the billionaire listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face, as if each word mattered, as if her struggle deserved space. Then, without warning, he stood and made a call, a short one, calm and direct, before turning to the staff and announcing that the day's schedule would change, that a room near the garden would be prepared, not as a holding space but as a playroom, filled with toys, books, warm food, and a caretaker, not for one day, but permanently, for any employee who had children with nowhere to go, and the words hit the room like a wave, disbelief rippling through the staff as whispers turned into gasps, while Aisha stood frozen, unsure if she had heard correctly, until he looked directly at her and said, "No mother should have to choose between work and her children," and in that instant, her knees nearly gave way, but he wasn't finished, because he then announced that Aisha's working hours would be adjusted, her salary increased, and that the twins' education would be fully sponsored when they were old enough, not as charity, he said, but as an investment in the future, because talent and kindness existed in every home, regardless of wealth, and as the meaning of his words sank in, tears flowed freely, not just from Aisha, who clutched her daughters to her chest, sobbing with relief, but from the other staff members who saw, perhaps for the first time, that compassion could live in places they never expected. The twins, unaware of the life-changing moment unfolding around them, laughed as bubbles floated through the air from the garden outside, and their laughter became the sound that broke everyone's hearts open, because it reminded them of innocence, of why kindness matters, of how small gestures can change entire futures. Later that day, as Aisha cleaned the halls with lighter steps, she realized that what had truly changed wasn't just her situation, but her belief in the world, because one man's gesture had restored her faith that hard work could be met with humanity, that dignity was not reserved for the wealthy, and that even in the grandest houses, it was compassion that made a place truly rich. Weeks passed, and the playroom became a symbol of hope, laughter echoing through the halls as children waited safely for their parents, productivity improved, smiles became common, and the mansion no longer felt like a place of quiet isolation but one of shared respect, and every time the twins ran into Mr. Hartman's arms calling him uncle, the staff saw a different side of the men they thought they knew, a man shaped not just by success, but by empathy born from understanding pain. And on a quiet evening, as Aisha watched her daughters fall asleep in a room warmer than any they had known before, she whispered a prayer of gratitude, knowing that their story would one day inspire others, reminding the world that real wealth is measured not by money, but by the lives we lived along the way. And if this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that kindness can change destinies and that compassion still exists in this world, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here we share stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all to never give up on humanity.